Fifth Street was not just a place with brick and mortar storefronts, streetlights, and ambient sounds. It was a place where like-minded people created a sense of family and community. People looked out for each other. Your child wasn't just your child, it was the village's child, and the village helped raise him or her. And although this was a community built out of necessity, mediocrity was never an option. The early Black business owners of Fifth Street knew that they had been presented with an opportunity to shape and define Black excellence in Lynchburg, a blueprint for Black culture whose impact still resonates today. In this episode, two local historians and social activists share their memorable experiences and curious encounters in and around the Fifth Street district.
My name is Doris Lee Lewis Waller, and I am Fifth Street. Well, for me, when I was about 15 or 16 years old, I joined Fifth Street Baptist Church. And anyhow, Fifth Street was really one of the only places Black could go. We had our own coal yard, restaurants, pool rooms, and everything right there on Fifth Street. That's right, and it was great. And everything was ran by Blacks. My fondest memories are eating where we don't get that kind of food anymore. Those restaurants, they had cooks. I mean cooks, and they cook from scratch. And one thing about them, a lot of them, they raised their own hogs and chickens and stuff, so everything they knew where it came from. I know a lot of people don't know about hanging meat in the meat house, where you had to put this pepper and stuff on it to keep it. We didn't have no rancid meat or anything. Everything was just up to par. Then we had another Mr. Jim down below where the community park at. Now he had a grocery store there. And you talking about some good strictly lean and fat back. And then Mr. Phelps, he had the theater across the street. And a lot of people looking for babysitters. But on Friday evening and Saturday all day, they didn't show anything but Westerns for the children.
And what was the name of the theater?
Harrison Theater.
And where was that located?
It was, I say about this, on the right-hand side going down, it was about the second place from 5th and Jackson Street. And anyhow, a lot of people, that's where they would carry their children on Saturdays and pay for them to go in, and they go shopping or whatever. And sometimes they would tell some of the children, I'll be back at 1 o'clock or 2 or whatever. And they had ushers. And so they had caught on to what was happening. So the usher would see to it that they went to the restrooms and everything when they got the popcorn or candy or whatever. Then some children, they didn't have change. And sometimes the person that was selling this stuff, they had a little purse with them where they would take money out of that and put in for the children that did not have. When a person got sick, they didn't have to go in the hospital, or they could be at home. They did not have to worry about food. It was a neighbor was going to come in and bring them whatever the doctor said that they need. They would go and get their medicine, prescription, with somebody sitting with you all day long, all day. And then, if you wasn't able to give yourself a bath, I don't care if you was a man or woman, those men would get in there and bathe and shave the men. And the ladies would take care of the women. So you knew that somebody was going to be with you 24/7. until the family came home. That's right. And that's, I wouldn't even call them neighbors. They was family, because everybody was family back then. You never had to lock your doors or nothing. And during my time, they had a little screen that you put underneath of the window. 24/7, you could leave home and leave that screen under that window. Nobody tried to break in your house or anything. But Fifth Street was the place to be. Between Community Funeral Home and Hudson Funeral Home, that was the hangout place.
That's
And
interesting.
and
hangout.
people wonder why we hung out there. Well, we knew the workers in there and everything, and we'll go in there and look at the body. Oh yeah, we were always look. We always would look to see who was there. And we would just sit there and talk. And we didn't have no limit to leave. That's right. You knew when to leave. It was a very welcome place on Fifth Street. And every Sunday, I'm going to take Fifth Street for example. Other churches did it, but we on Fifth Street. There was a bunch of men and a bunch of women. They would go visit. You didn't have to be a member of Fifth Street Church. If they had anyone, they had a list. They was going to come to your house and have prayer and bring you something. It was either something to eat, or maybe a book with a Bible verse in it or something, and would sing to you. This was every Sunday.
You can hardly get a pastor to come to his
Well, the pastor, this wasn't the pastors though. This was the women's of the church and the men of the church. And Carl Senior now, on Mother's Day, every elder woman anywhere in Lynchburg know that she was going to get some flowers on that day. And it wasn't no little bit of flower. Carl Senior did that every year on Mother's Day. He'd go to anybody's house, and you know you was going to get a gift from him. That's right. I mean, it was beautiful. It was really, really beautiful. And everybody treats you. I never forget when I first got married, and my husband and I was on Fifth Street eating, and we was getting ready to leave. And someone said something to me. And all of a sudden, this man said, "You be careful now. You know that's Charlie Goldplace's wife now." Uh-huh. Yeah. They used to call him Charlie Goldplaces because Jake Stone on Seminary Hill, he had a baseball team here called the Globetrotters. Uh-huh. And only place that they could play was over in Darrington on the field over there. And they had a crowd all the time because he either was down at the pool or up there looking at the game. But when they went out of town, they didn't have anywhere to stay. So they had to rush back before dark to get back to Lynchburg as close as they could. That's right. But they did it. They made it. This green book here, we had a white news place up at 7th and Main. They sold anything that you need in life, all kind of newspapers and everything. But this green book here, every black person, if you was traveling, or else if you were just here in Lynchburg, you had to have this book. This book inside is labeled about Lynchburg and other places where black folks could stay and they couldn't stay. And this book helped you to stay alive. This book here, everybody, I still have people say they never heard of the Green Book. But everybody needed this book. If you went out of town, you'll find whatever state you went to, and it tells you where blacks could go, eat, sleep, or whatever. But this is a very important book, this green book. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people have said that it didn't happen. I'm a junkie for news. And anyhow, I came across this a few months ago. And I said, this is something that I got to share with you all. There was a black man in Lynchburg. Looked sharp all the time. Looked like he was going to church every day. His name was Whit N. Brown. And I'm going to read this to you. Now, this was in the Lynchburg paper. It says, self-styled king of Fifth Street. Self-styled king of Fifth Street. When he died, he left all of his wealth to Lynchburg General Hospital. $48,746.91. Lynchburg General Hospital got this here.
Why did he do that, you think?
I don't know. It could have been Lynchburg General Hospital. It could have been nice to him or some of his family. And this was his way of saying thank you. And the understanding that I got, he did tell them where he wanted them, to put this money. Uh-huh.
Specifically outlined.
That's right. He outlined where he wanted the money to go.
And what did they call him? What was his nickname?
His name is Whit N. Brown. And they called him the self-styled king of Fifth Street. Okay. That's right.
Otherwise known as the kingpin?
The kingpin of Fifth Street. Okay. Mm-hmm. Oh, Johnny Franklin. Johnny Franklin, if you go to Fifth Street now, from Fifth Street, and you're going to pull into the side of the church, that's where John is. It's a picture in here somewhere. I can't get to it right now. But you see Johnny Franklin's coal yard right there. It was side by side to Fifth Street Church.
Fifth Street Baptist.
That's right, Fifth Street Baptist Church. And over top of his door, Johnny Franklin coal yard. And he had pockets, great big heavy pockets. That if you tell him you want a ton of coal or half a ton of coal or what, he'll put them in them pockets. And when he got to his house, he had someone to help him. He either put it in your coal house, or if you're going to put it on the ground outdoors, they had special cover to cover that coal over with. But Johnny Franklin was the stuff of Fifth Street with the coal. And he it's in this paper somewhere where you can see his little place of business.
So a lot of people used coal back then as a
coal and wood.
source.
Coal and wood. We had wood yards and coal yards. That's right.
Around what decades was this?
I said started way back in the 40s, but it went on until the late 70s when a lot of them died out, and so forth. No one else, wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. But you didn't have, now some people did split kindling, but they had kindling for you to buy in a paper bag about this high. Mm-hmm. And they would sell it for 75 cents, or whatever. But we had our own. I worked at Patterson Drugstore. I was hired to do the salads. They had a chart what they want me to put in the tuna and chicken salad and so forth.
And that's where Patterson's was located.
It's in the 1000 block down here on Main Street. Okay. And I was the only black, scared.
Why? Why were you scared?
Well, we was not warned that this was going to happen. These people came in from different college to sit in at the fountain. But a lot of people doesn't realize they didn't come in and just sit down. They got smiles on the other side over there. Oh, come again, come again. Each one of them bought something. You could even buy your prescription there. You could buy your lunch there. But you had to stand on the end of the counter, and they put it in a brown paper bag.
If you were black.
If you was black, you could not sit down, but you could buy your lunch there. So these
So
people,
they want your money, but not
they
the
want the
presents.
money, but you couldn't sit. So these people came in, and I always washed the dishes at night when Virgil would go home because she lived in Gladys. And so anyhow, when they came in, I was standing there looking. Ooh, you talking about scared. And at that time, we had telephones in every block, pay telephones. I didn't have a dime because my pocketbook was downstairs. I wanted to call somebody so bad. And anyhow, I didn't have a car at that time, and I was catching the bus. And I had to catch that bus and go home. But I prayed to, I really didn't even go to sleep that night. I talked to the Lord, what should I do? What should I do? But I went back the next day and smiled. This white guy sitting here on the counter, and they told the black ones, we can't serve you. So this white one got a cup of coffee, and she took and put that coffee in front of him. He slid it to the third one, and she went up there and grabbed that cup and threw it in the sink so fast.
Wow.
So they called John Patterson. He was the elder, but one of his nephews came, Bill Patterson, he came. And he talked to him and told him, said, we cannot serve you all. We had them from Randolph-Macon College, School on the Hill, and Lynchburg College.
We used to school on the hill. Is that
Huh?
Virginia
Yes.
University?
Uh-huh. Hankins was one of them. And I can't even think right now, but anyhow, they came and sat. This is the first time in my lifetime that I did not like the way the policemen handled them. All the white and the blacks was stowed up in a paddy wagon. You don't even put a dog in a dog panel like they were. But the man at Randolph-Macon College, he bailed his students out. That's right. But Reverend Hankins and Reeves over at the school on the hill, now they the one can tell you some history. Because Hankins now, they got so bad with him, he moved in the white section out Fort Hill. And for about a week or so, every night, they would burn a cross in his yard trying to scare him out of the neighborhood. Lynchburg have a lot of black history. And every now and then, when I can, I give it to them. I worked in the school system as a volunteer. And the way the school system is going now, that the parents are telling the teachers what you can teach and what you can't teach. When they gave us the books, we had to do what that book said. That's right. And I have worked in white folks' homes. Couldn't go through the front door. Had to go around the back. Black men, when they ate their dinner in a brown paper bag, they had to go somewhere outdoors, sit on the stoop or stand under a tree or sit down under a tree and eat. Now, the bus service here in Lynchburg one time, if you was black, you got up on the bus and put your fare in this thing. You back off, and you had to go through the back door because you only could use the seat on the back. Now, if a white man or white woman come and needed a seat, you had to stand up and hold on to this pole. Because white gonna have a seat, whether you're a man or woman. That's right. I don't know what year it was, way back in the 70s. She got up on the bus and she sat right behind the bus driver. She was a light-skinned lady. And the bus driver told her she couldn't sit there. She said, "Who gonna move me?" They called the police. I don't know what happened, but they didn't bother. You don't nobody know, and they don't want you to say anything about the Lord. But if it wasn't for him, us elders wouldn't be here today. When a child got saved, when a little boy got almost 9 or 10 years old, you had to call him master. And when the little girl got about 10 or 12, you had to call her Miss so-and-so.
The white kids.
The white children.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But I wish I could think of the woman's name on Seminary Hill, and you will get it from me.
Okay.
She was the one that broke up that stuff at Lynchburg General Hospital. When they carried her tray, they just had her name on there. Said Lucy Smith. That's all they had on the tray. Mm-hmm. She said, "Take it back. I am Mrs. Lucy Smith." She broke it. She broke it.
She was a black woman.
Black woman from Seminary Hill.
Wow.
That's right.
I think it said that you don't, freedom is not given to you, you have to take it.
Yeah, you got to take it. You got to take it, and even right now with me, and the city of Lynchburg know that I will do it. They do not want the white children in school to learn how the black children had to come up, and the grown folks either, black people either. But every now and then, I give it to them. I give it to them because I don't have a job to lose. Can't nobody fire me but God. You understand? And every now, and I got a lot with this new people that is on city council now. And everyone except for the one from the fire department, he don't know too much about. I don't guess he do, but anyhow, he will know me when I come.
That's good.
I had one city councilor. We was over at Jubilee, and we were talking about the guns in Lynchburg. And I told the policemen what they need to do. Don't you know one of the city councilmen got up and walked out because he didn't want to hear what I said? But it's okay.
Truth hurts.
The truth hurt, and I'm here to tell it.
Thank goodness.
88 and 11 months I've been here in Lynchburg.
And so, how old are you?
I am 88 years old and 11 months.
All right.
The 8th of February. Whether I'm dead or alive, I'll be 89 years old. 89. And I can tell you the history of Lynchburg.
My name is Beatrice Hunter, and I am 5th Street. My lineage in Lynchburg, Virginia started well before 1870. By the early 1900s, my family moved to the Timber-Tier area, which is just about a block or so off of 5th Street. And as a child, I was raised in that area, so I got to be on 5th Street quite a bit. When I was born 72 years ago, Carl B. Hutchison Sr. used his funeral home car as a hearse for the colored people in Lynchburg. We didn't have our own transportation. My mother called him, and he delivered my mother to 701 Harlan Street, where I was born at. So I've had my ride in the funeral home car already. After that, we lived on 3rd Street for many, many years. My early childhood and growing up in Timber-Tier on 3rd Street area, only a block or two from 5th Street. And one of my earliest childhood memories is of accompanying my mother to 5th Street for an ice cream treat. as children, we weren't allowed to go on Fifth Street. Children weren't hanging out with grown folks or anything, or being in grown folks' conversation. So a treat for us was going up to the barbecue grill to get a double scoop of ice cream on Sundays or after church or whatever. And I remember the wall of this building had a sign for Sunbeam across the wall. And I measured over the years my height by touching the sides of the wall. Many years later, I came back and I had touched the top of the M, which was the highest letter in the sign. And
How tall are you?
I'm 6'2". Well, actually, I'm shrinking. Um, I'm now 6'1.5" from what they tell me. But from 8 years old up until I got to 6'2", that was my measurement for my height, was touching that wall. I learned later on in life that that wall was the side of a building built by Adolphus Humbles. Adolphus Humbles was a mulatto in the 1800s. He built that building and the one on the corner of Fifth and Polk. This building at Fifth and Jackson that I measured my height by was for professional black men to have an office. And so many businesses have been in that building. Insurance offices, furniture offices. The Douglas Hotel was also in that building, and the Douglas Hotel was one of the places not listed in the Green Book, but it was one of the safe places for black people to stop during that time. Um, Another memory I have of Fifth Street is of Tip Tops. Tip Tops was a little white beer joint that was on the corner of Fifth and Federal Street. And at the time, I was probably about 9 years old. We could go to Tip Tops. They would send us to Tip Tops, but we weren't allowed to go inside. We had to order. The black people in the community had to order whatever they were getting from the window.
During in the
Segregation.
deep segregation part of our history.
Yes, yes. Later on in the years, we were started getting able to go inside. I didn't have any idea that segregation and racism had anything to do with that. In fact, when I left here and went to New York, I bragged about the fact that we got along great, not realizing that there were certain places we could go into and certain places we couldn't.
Do you feel that our parents, because I was kind of the same way, I didn't realize that there was so much segregation. Do you think our parents or our family or members shielded us?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I have a chapter in a book I wrote called Ignorance, Friend or Foe. Because especially during my time, I think the children of today are much more wiser and involved in more in conversations when it comes to everyday living in society than we were. My mother, I never knew racism existed. I never knew segregation existed. I thought I lived on Timbridge Hill and in this 5 block radius because that's just where we lived at.
When was your first recollection that you realized that some of the things you were experiencing were really because of racism?
Not until I went to New York. I moved to New York. And I went to New York fresh out of the South. And I bragged about how I went to New York at a time when the race riots was happening, when people were breaking in cleaners and stuff like that. And to be part of the in crowd, this is what you did also. And it would amaze me because I wondered, why are you breaking into Mr. So-and-so's cleaners? Why are you tearing up things? We don't act like that down south. We get along good with our white folks. And so I had no idea. My cousins that lived there really had a good time laughing at me, you know.
They thought you were naive.
Yeah, you're very naive, Beatrice. And they tried to teach me. They said, well, Beatrice, what's the name of your town? And I said, Lynchburg. And they said, Lynchburg. And I said, yeah, it's named after John Lynch, you know. And he was a general in the army, and I had no idea associating the Lynch movement and the Lynch practice with being a thing against black people and slavery and segregation. I had no idea. But in any case, I got a great education from them, to be honest with you. I came back down here fully aware that I was wrong all this time. I didn't write the book entirely. I'm working on my book. I should have been finished it by now. But I managed to finish 2 chapters, and I put it in a book by Chuck Brown. C. Nathaniel Brown, actually, his name is. And it's for sale on Amazon. And it's called I Thought You Should Know. It's an anthology and a bunch of short stories of black people, women experiences in America. Um, and 2 of the chapters that he submitted for me, because I only submitted one, a friend of mine, Jeff Dickerson, told me to do this. He loved my writing for some reason. And he told me to submit something to the book. And I did on a hunch. And sure enough, he published 2 chapters. One of the chapters was Ignorance, Friend or Foe, in talking about raising up and being born in Lynchburg and Fifth Street and all of that. And the other one was Up on the Block, Fifth Street Remembered, where I talk about my time and going into the sportsman club and growing up on Fifth Street and how Fifth Street helped me grow. It played such a major part in my growth. Um, so, yeah, I am Fifth Street. Back during the times of segregation, and I think even maybe today, African Americans have a tendency to name an area that they are more familiar with and whatever, and have a kinship spirit with. So places like the Bucket of Blood, which was down on 13th and Main Street, supposed to be in a cutthroat kind of area. Places like Black Bottom, where I was raised at on Timber Hill.
Why is it called Black Bottom?
I have no idea why it was called Black Bottom, because there was nothing
Is
dark
that the
about
bottom
it.
of a hill or something?
Well, you're in Lynchburg, you're in the bottom of a hill no matter where you go. but
Good point. Touche.
but I think it was a kind of slap in the face for about the black people who lived at the bottom of this particular hill. These people who lived in Timber Hill and around Fifth Street, and especially close to that area, were the working class blacks of Lynchburg. These were your laundresses who worked on Garland, washing clothes. These were the
White people?
white people. These were the people who took care of the lawns at Oakwood Country Club, but couldn't go to play golf there. These were your people who worked at Virginia Hotel as maids and had to go through the back door of the kitchen.
Couldn't stay there.
Couldn't stay there. But so these were also the people who ran numbers, 1 cent numbers to get $4, and made a living in a way they possibly could. Um, these were the people who worked at the men who worked at the foundry every day, and most of these people worked hard and did whatever was necessary to survive and raise families. These were the people who had bootlegging joints, sold 25-cent shots of liquor, or chicken sandwiches, or chitlin bowls. Like I said, this area was the area where the working class blacks of Lynchburg
So
etched
there
out a
was a
living.
division. I didn't mean to cut you off. There was a division
Oh,
between.
yeah, definitely.
Talk about that.
Black Bottom, like I said, was the working class. There was also an area of Lynchburg called the Elite 400s. The Elite 400s was the area on the other side of Fifth Street, going back toward 13th and 14th Street, Wise, Pearson Street. These were the more influential, affluential blacks in Lynchburg. Most of them, a lot of them were mulattoes who had white fathers or whatever. These were the ones who were the mailmen, the teachers, the poets. They're the influential blacks, so they were called the Elite 400. Now, the 400, I don't know where they got that name from. But then there was Chinatown. Chinatown was the area of Campbell Avenue. I have no idea why they called it Chinatown at all. I got these names from a man called Mr. Piggy Miner when I was a dispatcher at Greyhound bus station. Mr. Miner came in and was waiting for his bus one day, and he said, so much you don't know about Lynchburg. So he started and went on to tell me about the areas of Lynchburg that I had never heard of before. He also told me about when he worked in the hosiery mill and how it was to come downstairs and use the water fountain, because they had the white and the colored water fountains even in the places that he worked at or that he worked at. And it was so wonderful listening to him talk. Speaking of another area, there was the Bucket of Blood. Um, Bucket of Blood was the area of 13th and Main Street. From 13th all the way back. I think Lynchburg wasn't fully developed at this time or whatever. And most of the area down there was annexed from Campbell County.
This would have been what, 40s, 50s?
This was the early 1900s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the Bucket of Blood was the angrier blacks. And you didn't want to hang out in the Bucket of Blood too long. But the
Why
angrier
were they
blacks,
angry?
I think because of the situation and living arrangements that there was, but everybody was angry at this time that I'm talking about because it was after the Civil War. It was during Reconstruction. The whites had the lower part of the river, which was called Buzzard Roost. This is where the saloons and the bawdy ladies hung out at. They had the gunfights and the sword fights, and everything happened down at the Buzzard Roost on Jefferson Street and Fifth Street and around that area. The blacks had the Bucket of Blood up closer toward White Rock now today. When the hotel came in, when the Travel Lodge came in, many of the Bucket of Blood residents moved away. And that's what stopped a lot of that happenings that was going down there, because Lynchburg started to develop at that area down there. And a lot of the business owners of down there, my great-great-grandfather worked for a man named William Miller, who at the time had his house, what they call Williamsburg, actually it was 13th and Main or 14th and Jefferson or Horsford Road. He moved up to Harrison Street or Madison Street and now Garland Hill area. So like I said, a lot of the areas in Lynchburg was named by black people because of the kinship of the area. Let's see, at Bucket of Blood, Black Bottom, Chinatown, the Elite 400s, Chinchilla. Chinchilla.
Where was Chinchilla?
Chinchilla is 4th Street.
Oh, okay.
Chinchilla is 4th Street from, say, Jackson down to Clay Street.
Okay.
And I have no idea, because by this time Mr. Minor's bus hit came, so I couldn't ask him why did he get the name Chinchilla. And surprisingly, it has always surprised me that it was called Chinchilla because this is where those rich white people moved to. And this is where the mansions were and the slave quarters were. And you would think with the wealth that was in the Garland Hill at this time, Chinchilla, bedbugs. Another word for chinches is bedbugs to those who don't know. So I never got to ask him. I asked one of the curators at Jones Library why do he think it was Chinchilla, knowing he probably didn't know. But he said probably it's where they had a whole lot of chinches at. And I just left it alone. I just left it alone. Bawdy ladies of Lynchburg. There's a historian here in Lynchburg. Her name is Mrs. Nancy Whelan. She's one of the curators at Jones Memorial Library, where I did a lot of research, my genealogy research. And I've gone back to 7 generations in my family, and they were all here in Lynchburg on pretty much Timbertier area. And I learned through this research about the Bawdy ladies that lived on Jefferson Street. Bawdy ladies is another word for prostitution, prostitutes. And like I said, when they came back the soldiers came back from the war,
The Civil War.
the Civil War, the white women didn't have economic ability to take care of themselves. And they also did whatever was they could to support and take care of their families and whatever, including prostitution. But I never look back in history to judge anybody. The city closed up the houses in Buzzard Roost, and these women moved to Timber Hill. Yeah. And they came up and they started living on 4th Street and a lot of those houses. Like I said, I grew up on Timber Hill and around 5th Street, and I had no idea that this was what I know. The last madam that lived on Timber Hill used to send me, she was the one that used to send me the tip tops for her and let me keep the change. And I had no idea she was a madam. I really didn't know it. I knew she had these red beads at the windows, and she'd burn a candle in the window and whatever. I knew that certain gentleman that I had never seen before in the area used to come to her house and sit around and whatever. But I didn't know anything about it. I just knew she was a very nice lady. But again, these
Was she a
women,
white woman or?
she was white. She was the only white woman in the area at the time that I was coming up. And I didn't give it a whole lot of thought. I thought it was unusual, but I didn't give it a whole lot of thought because she was so nice. She was really so nice. Um, I can't remember at this moment what her name was. Um, but there was a lot of white women again that lived and worked right along beside the black women on 4th Street. A lot of the black women turned to prostitution to take care of themselves. These prostitutes also took care of the almshouse.
What's that?
The almshouse is another word for poorhouse.
Okay.
Before there was a hospital for black people to go to, black people were poor. If you poor, you went to the almshouse. It was on Hollands Mill Road, and
Which
it
is
was
right off of it.
right off of Fifth. Yeah, and it was a poorhouse. It was rat infested. It was dirty. It wasn't being cared for or anything. I think one of the doctors there became annoyed behind the filth and whatever that these people were living in or being treated in. And he talked to the city about building a hospital for black people to have somewhere to go. And this doctor convinced the city to build the hospital at 701 Holland Street, the Lynchburg Hospital. And black people and poor people, even poor whites, not very many, went to that hospital. These prostitutes that moved to 4th Street helped support and take care of this almshouse. They paid people's hospital bills or medical treatments and whatever.
So what did people do? Black people and poor people do as far as hospital needs before that?
Well, before then, we had, if to deliver a child, they had the midwives,
And they were doing it in
and
the
they were
home?
doing it in home.
Okay.
Um, oh, our parents knew a lot.
What,
I haven't read anywhere that it said that we were involved in a lot of shooting each other and things back in that time. I can imagine we got into fights and whatever the case may be, but with all my research, I've never read that black people had this thing against each other. We had this quiet kind of segregation among each other. Um, our skin tones had a lot to do with that. We made up when I was a child. We had a story, a childhood rhyme. If you light, you're right, and then if you're black, get back. You know. So that's how we did. We dealt with each other, or was taught to deal with each other. I think most of the time, like I said, our parents were very adept at taking care of us. They knew they had brought and learned lessons from their parents about how to take care of them, which brought over the lessons they had learned from Africa and other islands. So it was nothing for my grandmother or aunt to go out in the woods and get some poke salad and cook that up for us and whatever, or get some tartar and put a tonic or something on you or whatever. We cured each other, home remedies. Yeah. Very resourceful. I mean, we had no other choice, you know, and it's so great and good at the time that these traditions and stories kept going down and kept getting passed along because I really truly believe that had it not been for 100-year-old stories or 50-year-old stories, I don't know that we'd fared so as well as we did, you know. Um, I think also at that time we weren't subjected to a lot of the nuances of today, which needs a lot of more nuanced medication. So at that time, some casserole will cure you, you know. My grandmother was a Jehovah Witness, and we lived on Fifth between Taylor and Monroe, and she attended the Jehovah Witness Hall at Fifth and Taylor. And I remember being a child and watching Officer Dickey and Officer Farrell, who was the first black police in Lynchburg. And they did foot patrols back in those days. So these cops would walk all the way up and down Fifth Street, and this was during the time when the village took care of the village. So Officer Dickey and Officer Farrell knew a lot of the people who they were charged with servicing, and their way of handling it was quite different sometimes. They would treat you more like a cousin or a brother or something. If they seen you doing something wrong, they would say, maybe you should go home or maybe you shouldn't be in there today. And we listened, and as a child, yeah, we had a lot of parents in the village. Every grown person was a parent practically. I would say so. Um, I think even if you mention these officers' names to people who were born during this time or lived during this time, you would hear nothing but good stories about Officer Farrell and Officer Dickey and the police who foot patrolled and got to know the neighborhood and had that relationship with the neighborhood.
Sounds like that's something they should
I
continue
think,
doing.
I think when they stopped walking the neighborhood and stopped getting to know the people they were charged to serve, I think a lot of the problems of today comes from the fact that we don't know each other. And these men not only maybe didn't wasn't born and raised in the neighborhood, but they went to the schools, and in patrolling the area, they got to know people and weren't afraid of us. I think not knowing us makes us afraid of each other. And anybody tell you, I have to say this, anybody tell you that men don't gossip, they never been a dispatcher, because men gossip a lot. Um, you need to know these things. You need to learn. You need to read. You need to ask questions. People have a tendency to take things that we develop and use it for their own good. And that I don't think they take time to really realize what the word means either. I've seen and heard the word woke used in such negative connotations,
Yeah.
and it has nothing at all to do with the origin of the word in the first place.
Yeah.
So
Personally, I want to be woke.
who wouldn't? I don't want to be. Only thing comes from sleep is dreams. Somebody gave everybody black rose-colored glasses,
Oh.
and they started to see the world in those rose-colored glasses, and it was so much easier not to rattle the boat or not to make waves by going along to get along.
Your experience.
In my opinion, we asked for what what we got was not what we wanted. Doing, we wanted integration, and we wanted what comes from being integrated. We want the better books in our schools. We wanted the better education. We wanted our teachers to be able to get a higher education so they could in turn give it to us. But I think what we got and not thought fully about what we were doing, we took a lot from ourselves. We gave up a lot. Um, Fifth Street, for instance, was lost because of integration. You no longer had to eat from those restaurants, so the black businesses went out of business. You no longer had business on Fifth Street, so the black businesses went out of business. Also, I think that a lot of this, if you want to do a conspiracy theory sort of thing, sounds like a part of a plan. Um, we'll give you, we'll give some of you more than others. We'll, and that in turn, the plan in the beginning was to divide and conquer the slaves and make one slave think he was better than the other. And we put one of the slaves in the house and let him work in the house. And we put the other one in the field. And we'll teach this two blacks to feel like they're better than each other. I think part of the plan today is that same thought is processing that's going along. Most people who have the power and the money that can make the changes don't feel like they want to rock the boat to make any changes. Those people like me who can't do anything, I'm stuck and staying where I'm designed to be stuck and stay. I don't and never have looked forward to being rich or making it. I don't think my attitude will allow me to anyway. Um, but I think part of that was part of the plan, and I think when we stop and start getting back to that unity and that village and that community kind of sense, black people will fare a lot better, you know, because we got power and strength and unity. We've accomplished so much over the years and decades of America and helped build America, but we did it together. We walked and marched together. We held hands together.
And each one teach
Each
one.
one,
You bring someone.
you bring
else
someone up with you, you know.
Yeah.
And I think the problem today is that we don't seem to want to bring anybody along.
We've got ours, and that's it.
And that's it. That's it, you know. And the thing of it is that what many of those who got theirs had to come to realize is that we came over on different boats. We might live in different neighborhoods, but we're all in the same boat. And it's so much easier for you to get it, but it's so much easier for you to lose it also. So you can have it at 4 o'clock, and by 4:30 you'd be broken next door to me. I'm remembering now as I speak about a police officer coming up to Fifth Street one night and giving me a freezer bag full of Chiba Chiba.
And you'll have to tell our audience what Chiba Chiba is.
Chiba Chiba, I'm sorry. I think they called it marijuana. The Chiba Chiba was the name we gave it from New York, but he gave me this large bag of Chiba Chiba. And I didn't have no idea what it was about. I just went around giving everybody a handful of marijuana. You know, it was like the flea market. Here, you get some, and everybody else, y'all get some. I had no idea. A cop gave it to me, so it must have been okay, right? All the memories about Fifth Street. I mean, like I said, it wasn't all religious, you know. My first fight was in front of the WW Lounge.
You had a fight.
On Fifth Street of all places, yes. Um, and I can't today think about what it was, but this was a time when you got into a fight, but the next day you'd meet at Early's or one of the restaurants and have a quarter beer together, and everything was fine and dandy. Nobody was trying to really do anybody any real harm.
People live to talk about it.
We talked about it the next day. So, like I said, I learned to shoot pool up at one of the pool rooms. Uh, it just so many memories, so much living,
education.
so much living and education came from Fifth Street, and I think it made me who I am today. And I can say today that I am Fifth Street, and I am a survivor. Not too long ago in the 90s, there was a push to name Fifth Street the Martin Luther King Boulevard. Many folks in Lynchburg didn't want that to happen for obvious reasons, first of all. And so I wrote a letter to the news, and I tried to remind the white people of Lynchburg that y'all used to love it at one time too. When Trailway Bus Terminal brought your loved ones home from World War II and World War I, you loved Fifth Street. When you were eating pastries from Bill's Pastry, you loved Fifth Street. When you went to Fifth Street Market, I wanted people to remember it not only played such a wonderful part in the African American community, which it did, and I take nothing from it, but I wanted the white people to remember this also. And so I suggested that if they didn't want to name it the Martin Luther King Boulevard, then name it the Thornhill Hutchinson Drive, after the only 2 African American mayors that the city has ever had. Their funeral homes were still on Fifth Street. And surprisingly enough, after I wrote that letter, it became Martin Luther King Boulevard. Like I'm calling this city today about this building at Fifth and Jackson. Mayor tweeted told me that if I had $76,000 that I could probably save that building. But I wish I had 76,000 because I would spend every dime on to save that building. It's the only building in Lynchburg that was built by blacks, for blacks. Adolphus Humbles again built that building. And I feel like for that to be torn down, for that piece of history to be gone, it's taken a lot out of Lynchburg itself, not just the African American community.
Just curious, do you think people would contribute to a GoFundMe page?
I have never thought about doing one because times have changed so much and people don't seem to care about things as much as they used to. And I think also that that building has been sold and someone has bought it now. I have no idea what she's planning to do with it or whatever. I'm glad that she has bought, that someone did buy it because no one was taking care of it and it was crumbling right before our eyes. So the fact that she has bought it, I have contacted the Historical Society because I wanted to give it a historical designation. Having an historical designation means that whoever owns it will have to keep it up, and the possibility of it being demolished or torn down or whatever would be so much lesser.
If it has a historical designation, they have to kind of keep at least the facade.
The facade
true
of
to
it,
what it originally
exactly.
was.
Yes, yes. Like I said, it's the only other building. The other building that was built by Adolphus Humbles was the Sportsman Club.
And what building was it that you're trying to preserve again?
It's at the corner of Fifth and Jackson Street.
Okay.
It's across the street is the Kentucky Hotel. This is the building right on the corner of Fifth and Jackson. It has had many names over the years. It's been the Silver Slipper. It's been Barbecue Grill. It was Cook's Table. So it's had many restaurants and many names over the years. A family actually lived there and managed and took care of the building for many, many years, the Stevens family. And it's the only building on Fifth Street. There aren't very many buildings on Fifth Street, as you know. I think maybe 3 or 4 at most. But it's the only building in Lynchburg that an African American built. Adolphus Humbles actually built this building. And he also built the Sportsman Club. The Sportsman Club was to be the convention center and the event area. The corner of Fifth and Jackson was to be the offices and professional building. Adolphus Humbles was also the contributor financially for Virginia Seminary and College. They have a dorm over there called Humbles Hall, named after him.
He was quite a visionary.
Oh, yes, yes. Not only was he a visionary, for to be a African American and back in those days, he was very frugal and whatnot. He became rich actually off of saving his money, whatever. He was so good at taking care of the community and doing for other people that people went to him for loans and things to start businesses of their own. He worked on the Bateau down on James River. He worked at the tobacco factories. And like I said, again, he saved all this money. He's the only person with this history in Lynchburg.
Where are his descendants?
As far as I can find out, I don't think there are any left in Lynchburg. Mr. Humbles used to live on Campbell Avenue, not far from Virginia Seminary and College. The family itself got a bad reputation for a while because they adopted what people thought they adopted white kids and was taking care of them. Those white kids that they thought they were adopted was actually family members. But mulatto, he was a mulatto. Yes, he almost looked white. And
People had issues with it?
Yes, they had a problem with that. Okay.
That's all we'll say about that.
Okay, and the last thing I want to tell you about is because I'm still on this I am Fifth Street. So the last thing I wanted to tell you about was when I got married on Fifth Street. Actually, I didn't get married on Fifth Street. I got married on Federal Street. And I was poor, didn't have any money at the time to celebrate our wedding. And so the only place I could think of to celebrate it was on Fifth Street. It had played such a major part in my life to start with. Why not my wedding? So I went to Lewis's, and me and my husband, and we bought a couple of quarts of beer, and we celebrated and had the best reception at Lewis Watson's restaurant on Fifth Street. so much of Fifth Street has played such a major part in my life, and I am so grateful and glad to have had the opportunity. Carl B. Hutchinson Sr. used his funeral home car to bring me to this world. And the saddest thing about what I'm about to tell you is because Carl B. Hutchinson Sr. and Jr. was also the last ride through Fifth Street that many of us had. Had not have been for Hutchinson and Thornhill funeral homes, you know, we wouldn't have, we took that last ride through Fifth Street in those cars.
First and last.
The first and last ride in Lynchburg was on Fifth Street. Came from Fifth Street. It's also had a black Mecca, Black Wall Street. These Wall Streets in various cities around the country lifted African Americans up economically, socially, emotionally, physically. It made people who had been called boy men. We grew in these meccas. Fifth Street was the black Mecca of Lynchburg. There was so much. If it had not have been for the businesses that took care of the villages or the villagers, I don't know if a lot of us would have made it. These businesses were on Fifth Street. The social clubs, the fraternity organizations, and whatever had offices on Fifth Street, centralized location where everything was at, but it was on Fifth Street. It wasn't on Main, 12th, or Taylor. Fifth Street is very, very important. And what I would tell the youth of today is, you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. And you have to know what have to get you there across that river. Because the same boat that brought you across, brought you this way, may have to take you across the other way. I would tell the youth of America, learn. Don't stop with what you see on Facebook. Don't stop with what you hear on the CDs or the DVDs. Ask questions. Read a book. Talk to the elders. They have so much knowledge and they know so much more. We think we know. We don't know. There's so much more to it all, you know. And the only way we're going to get back to where we used to be is learn, want to learn, you know. That's where I think. I think history is the best teacher and the best promoter.